Welcome to Signal Theory. My name is Brian. In this video, my buddy Bradford and I are going to talk to you all about what proxy cloning is in the Line 6 Stadium, what you can do with it, how it sounds, our thoughts using it. We're going to go through all kinds of stuff like how to make a clone, how to use it in a preset, everything like that. All of it's going to be chapter markered below, so if you want to jump to different sections of the video, you can do that. Before we start, a few things. One, I want to say a huge thank you to Line 6 for sponsoring this video. Two, we've made some videos about proxy already. They'll be linked below. One of those was our experience using it live. Bradford and I both play at church almost every weekend, so we've used proxy in the stadium live there. That's linked below over at our other channel, Worship Tutorials. Finally, you're going to hear a bunch of playing samples through a lot of different amps in this video. We've made all of those amp clones available, some free, some not free, all of that over at signaltheoryaudio.com. I'll link to that below the video so you can go grab stuff. Like I said, there are some full free packs available for you there based on a Vox AC30 and a Victory Sheriff 44. You can grab that. No strings attached, but there are some other collections and amp clone packs available there as well. And last but not least, we'd love for you to subscribe to the channel here at Signal Theory Audio. We're going to have lots more content on the stadium, but we make content on all things guitar gear. We do love the modeling, capturing side of things, but hey, we demonstrate amps and that kind of stuff as well. So if you're into this kind of content, please subscribe. Go over what is proxy, what is a clone, what can you clone with it. So proxy is Line 6 cloning engine. You might think of it as capturing. Now, if you're not familiar with what capturing is, we'll talk about that. I know a lot of you watching are very familiar with amp and pedal captures and clones and that kind of thing. But simply what a clone is a digital, you could think of it as a digital picture of a piece of gear at the settings where you cloned it. So take an amplifier, for example. Let's say you've got a Mesa Boogie dual rectifier. It has a clean channel, it has a dirt channel, it's got different voices in the high gain channel. A clone of that amp or a capture of that amp is going to be the amp exactly how you have it set. So if it's clean with the gain on 4 and the treble on 7 and the bass on 5, the clone or the capture of that amp is exactly as it is set. You cannot then go in and change the gain or the channel of the amplifier after you've made the clone. It's just as that amplifier was set. Same thing goes for pedals. If you clone a Tube Screamer overdrive pedal with the volume on 10 and the gain on 0 and the tone on 7, that is what your clone is. You don't then have the ability in the clone to go turn the volume down and the gain up. You'd have to make another clone. That's why when you download like amp clone packs or capture packs, there's a whole bunch of captures in there. So it is, you know, we'll make a capture of the amp at all these different settings of the amplifier. It's sort of static in that way, and it's not dynamic in the way an amp model is, like an Agora amp model where you have access to all the controls on the amp and you can change it. Bradford's going to talk a bit more about the difference between a model and a clone later, but that is simply what a clone is. A few other things about a clone, you know, if it's an amp and cab clone, it's going to include the cabinet, the speaker in the cabinet, the microphone or microphones that you use to capture it, to mic it, and then in our case, like we often run it through preamps with EQ. Like I've got these API style preamps right behind me with EQ units in them, and so it's going to include all of that sort of in the recipe, you know, of how you capture an amp or mic an amp. All of that is in the clone itself, and it sort of replicates what you would do as if you have like a you know, an amp model set a certain way with IRs that were made of a particular cabinet or speaker, or you know, the cabinet block with mics and that kind of thing. That's what a clone is, but it's all in one, you know, one block in your stadium. Now, what can you clone? What kinds of clones can you make with the stadium? There's sort of 4 options right now. You can do an amp and cab clone. So again, that's going to be the amplifier, the cabinet, the speaker, the mics, everything all in that one clone. So it condenses it all into a single clone block. Then you can do an amp only clone, and that is just the head. So to make an amp only clone, you'll need like a load box or something that interfaces between the amp and the cab or the speaker that gets you a direct send. So it's just the amp head or just the amplifier portion of a combo. And then when you use that in the stadium, you'll have to add a speaker or speaker model or IR of a speaker cabinet or something to use it. You can also make a preamp clone, which is just the preamp section of an amplifier. And then finally, you can make a drive or distortion clone. So that's any kind of overdrive, distortion, you know, it could be a preamp pedal kind of a thing, a fuzz pedal. You can clone those as well. So you sort of have these 4 categories. They actually kind of line up with categories of effects in the stadium because you can pull in, and there's no amp and cab. I guess there is an amp and cab. It'll pull in an amp with the cab block that goes with it. Then you can have the amp only block. You can have a preamp block, or you can have a distortion block. So it's just clones of either your gear or someone else's gear that they've cloned and made available to you. So that is what a clone is and the different kind of clones that you can make with the stadium.
in the Stadium, we have the new Agora amp modeling. We got that at launch, and now we have Proxy. How are they different? What's the difference here? Modeling of an amp is taking everything. You know, I know Neural does it one way, and I think Line 6 does it another way. It's different approaches, but the end result is the same. It's, can we put an amp that exists in the real world into this digitally, and you get the full spectrum, all the controls of the amp, and you don't get that with Proxy. Proxy, what you get is the ability to put any amp you want inside a Stadium. Now, you could do it yourself. If you have an amp yourself that you really like and want to do it, you can do that. You could do the same thing with drives. Line 6 has said that there could be a possibility of other things in the future. For now, I will say a time-based thing, not doable. It's not really how it works. Proxy is taking snapshots of a sound, in this case, fuzz, overdrives, distortions, amps. Quad Cortex has added in their V2 software the ability to capture compressors, which is very interesting. I haven't personally tried that, but I've seen people say that it does seem to do that. Line 6 has told us in the future there could be other things. They have not disclosed any of that. But Proxy, exact snapshot of an amp or drive pedal in that moment, modeling, full spectrum of the modeled amp. They typically give you all the channels and all the controls on the amp as well. And those are the kind of the big differences.
Quickly take you through the process of creating an amp and cab clone. So we've got the Dr. Z Z-Rec here. It is connected to a cab in the room behind me, and mics are on the cabs, and then I've got it coming back into Stadium. So we're gonna go through how the process works, but also how close it sounds. So I have this preset actually set up where I can A/B between the real amp, which is coming in here through the mic input, and then the clone that we're gonna make. And you can hear exactly how close it gets. We can even add things like drive from this drive block that'll go into both the real thing and the clone. So the first thing you do is go to New Clone. And then we can select the type. So like I said, this is an amp connected to a cab with mics on the cab. So we're going to select amp and cab. Hit next. Now it's going to go through some warnings and some diagrams. So yes, we're going to send loud signals through your amp. It's going to get loud. And then it gives you a diagram. So I have actually done exactly this. Send 4 is right here. It's coming out. It's this green cable you can see coming into the amp. It's green cable. My situation is a bit unique because I'm not just putting a mic on the cab and then running the mic back into the mic input, which you can. I actually have two mics set up on this cab. I have a Royer 121 and a Sennheiser MD 421. Those two mics are running into API style preamp and EQ hardware modules, and then that is getting summed to mono, and then it's coming back, and I have a cable that converts that to this XLR in right here. So I've got those two mics coming back into the mic input. We've done the setup exactly how they describe here. Hit next, and now we can test it. So when I play, it's going to send my guitar into the amp, and I'm going to hear the mic'd signal coming back. You can see that it comes back, and there's like a green area on the level meter where you want the cab, where you want the signal to come back. You can raise and lower that here. But I'm right in the sweet spot. So we'll just press next, and now we can name it whatever we want. I'm just going to call it, for the sake of this demo, ZREC Demo. Hit done. You can add some details about the amp, Dr. Z, ZREC. Of course, all of this is pretty easy on this touchscreen. And then there's like info section. You can add anything you want here. So if you grab the clones from us at Signal Theory, we're gonna have a lot of information about the amp. We're gonna have like even where the knobs are in many cases. Things like the cab it's running through, the speakers, the mics, all that kind of stuff. So you can put anything you want in here. Notes here, that's all it's gonna say on this one. And then once you're done, you've got it all set up, sounds the way you want, hit clone, and it's going to run a bunch of test signals through your amp. It's going to upload that to line 6 to their servers. It's going to create the clone on their server side and then download back to your unit. The whole process round trip takes well under 10 minutes, maybe between 5 and 7 minutes. It kind of depends on how busy the servers are. All right, once the test signals have finished going through the amp or the system that you're cloning, it will upload that file to line 6's servers. It will then queue it. There it goes, it's queued, and then it will process it and bring it back down. It'll download it to your unit. Once the processing is finished, it downloads the clone back to your Stadium, and you get this screen where you can A/B the clone to the source the source thing that you captured, which in this case is the amp. So first we have the original, the amp, then the clone. Already it sounds pretty identical to me. You know, when you're doing these things, especially if you have an amp in the room with you, one thing you have to do is isolate yourself from the noise of that cab, which is coming through the wall. So I'm hearing low end resonance from the cab itself. You're hearing a more accurate representation, just what the mics are picking up. One thing I've noticed on this screen is things are often not volume matched perfectly. Sometimes the amp, the original, is a little bit louder, and there isn't any way to change this stuff. Well, actually, you can change it right here. So I'm going to add about a dB of gain, of post gain. I'm just going to make the level of the clone a little louder. I still find it a lot easier to A/B these things in this A/B preset that I have created here. So we're just going to grab the clone we just made, the ZREC demo clone. I'm going to turn it up just a little bit because I feel like I usually have to do that. So the way this preset is set up, first thing is the clone snapshot. You just have the clone, and that's it in a volume block. Then the real amp is going to turn the clone off. We have send 4, which goes to the amp, and then we have the mic in, which is coming back from the from the mics, and then that all goes to the bottom row. So we can easily A/B it here. One thing you can do to make sure things are volume leveled is go to your matrix output view and see where these peaks end up. I can see the clone is still just a tiny bit quieter, so I'm gonna up it to 1 dB of output gain. Okay, now they're even. They sound the same to me. One thing that this preset allows me to do as well is I can turn a drive on. So now we're gonna see how the clone reacts to overdrive as well as the real amp. First the clone. We'll turn that drive back off. Let's roll volume down and see what happens on our guitar. I mean, sounds the same. The last thing you can do here is I've added a looper in here, so I can just record something, loop it, and then I can switch back and forth, and it takes my playing out of the equation because it's the same thing. So I'm gonna do that real quick. So there you go. How close do they sound? Let your ears be the guide. In these lower to mid gain amps, they sound pretty much identical to me, at least on par with everything else that we have available to us on the market.
So how might you use Proxy? The obvious answer to, I think, most people is to capture amps. I have seen people in different places on the internet express that they have no desire, no interest to use Proxy. And of course, that's totally fine. But I do want to submit a couple things, some considerations for you as to why you may like it. Maybe not all the time, maybe occasionally and whatnot. I find it funny, though. One reason that I was going to express kind of falls apart to a certain extent because Ben Adrian, one of the designers, and he does a lot of the models with Sam, two great guys that I've met regularly when we're visiting Line 6. They work on the models, and I know there's another team, but I know those guys. Ben has an amp called the Cartographer, which started as a trainer, and I believe, I don't remember the full story, I'm sure you can find it somewhere, but it's an amp that's been modified and tweaked regularly over the years. Little different here. That didn't exist in the Helix, and Ben just went part by part, component by component, and modeled it and put it in the Helix, and we have it in the OG Helix, we have it in Stadium. You and I cannot do that. So What we need to do is proxies capture. I just find it really funny because it's like my argument here is if you have an amp that you would like to have in the Helix and you like to use it digitally, maybe you're in a band and you only want to use that amp for 1 or 2 songs, or maybe, and you just don't want to lug multiple amps, or you just don't want to use amps, period. You know, all the reasons why you get a Helix. You could mic it up and set it exactly as you normally would use it, maybe exactly how you use it in the studio when you were making the song or whatever, and you can capture it. Now, we like to use some extra sauce. We do some, we dual mic it, we run it through a Neve, we send it back to the unit, so it just gives it a little extra studio magic. And a lot of people who make captures like we do, they do the same thing. For me, for example, I really love the Benson Chimera, and I would like to be able to utilize it in my unit. So I have, in this preset I have pulled up, which you're looking at here on the screen, you're seeing 2 captures of amps at the end here, and you also see a drive capture here. And to be honest, so some people, they may not think that this is a big deal, but to me, this is a slim signal chain because Proxy does take up a lot of space. I have Matchless C30 capture in here, and I have a Benson Chimera capture in here. You could, yes, there is a Agora C30. Why not just use that? I just, I haven't done that actually. I haven't tried to use a capture versus Agora, or capture with Agora, but I could do that. But I know there's a little bit more consistency because these 2 captures are shot with the same microphones, and they are using, Brian made the C30, I made the Chimera. And there's just a little bit of that different thing for right now. But you can see I have 2 of those, and I have 2 verbs. I have a Glitz, which is like my massive verb, and then I have a Legacy Hall, which is like what I use for all the time. There is not much room to get anything else. See, if I go to modulation, there's nothing stereo but a tremolo that I can use. And there's a handful of legacy effects, which are by default stereo. But if I go to delay, I can't get anything. I can get the simple delay in, but it's mono. I can't get any legacy delays in. So if you want 2 stages of verb, you need to use like a stomp shot is what it's affectionately called when you like use a button to control parameters on a block. And then you also end up taking up a button. We could go down this road forever, but all you need to know is that it takes up a lot of room. So I have these 2. Here's just my bass sound for you, by the way. Let me do it dry, even though I can't stand that sound. I think it sounds good. Here's a little bit of hall. That is really just so it doesn't feel dry. The other reason you may want to use this is if you have a drive pedal that you would like to have in your unit, which notoriously is hilarious to me and others, I'm sure. There's no blues driver, and people have been asking for it for years. So now I'm wondering if Line 6 is like, no, we're just not doing it. And now Proxy's coming, so you can capture it if you want. I have a case study Aspen in the drive. If you look here in my chain, you see there's an effects loop, and then this is a distortion clone, as it were. Here's the effects loop. You could do that if you wanted to, but another reason why you may want to use Proxy and use captures is so you don't have to have other stuff. Like if I want to use one drive, I'm going to use it pretty consistently. I don't need to hook anything else up. I'm going to capture it, and maybe you switch presets and you have different settings. You can capture different settings. You can get a little more mileage out of a pedal that way. If you look at this top row, you'll see there's not much up here either. There's a good amount. To some people, this is a just fine signal chain. But I have a compressor, I have the air apparent, and I have my distortion clone and the effects loop, which I don't really think uses much, if any, DSP. I have a volume pedal. I have 2 delays. I have the transistor tape, which is a little bit heavier on DSP. I have 2 of them actually. This other one I use as as a dual delay. I have the spread. I'm sorry, I have the scale adjusted so I can have a dual delay. But if you look, let's click on something. Let's go to modulation. I do have room to put some mod in there. I can put everything in there. Well, there you go. Could do another delay. Okay, so you could do more than it seems. Verb, I could put everything in. So I could start building some stuff. The glitz is here. Let's say, for example, I wanted to put a chorus in. Let's just click on that. Let's see what else I can do. Okay, so I could get an octave in here. So let's put the Boctaver. I love that. Let's build this back up. I pulled more out than I thought I did. Oh, I was trying to do 2 captures. That's the thing. So you can slowly start building up your chain again. I can still put another modulation in there. Could I put another overdrive? I could put the prize drive in there. So I could in fact have 3 stages of gain if I want. And I got 2 mods, you know, could I get another delay even still? I could get another transistor tape or the vintage digital. I really like that, honestly, for like a dual delay. I could do that. So that's not bad, but that's 1 clone. If I wanted to have 2, let's see what I have to take away. The prize, the octave, the mods, the vintage digital. That's back to where I was. Can I get another capture in there now? I still, see, that's the thing. I can't get another one. So you're pretty limited when you do that. It would be nice at some point. Could we get, I don't know how it shakes out, but is there some way that maybe drive captures take less DSP? Is that doable? Does that make sense? I don't know, but let's listen here. The case study Aspen is like, Tony is his name. Tony took the JHS kilt and kind of made a handful of tweaks to just things he saw people asking for. I really like both, actually. And the kilt is based off of a X-Band Dora. Let us hear how it sounds. I'll show you my bass tone. Just turn the effects loop on so you can get the pedal. Swap over to the distortion. Well, it says distortion clone. Swap over to the capture. Hear the low end kind of getting shelved off with this pedal. I don't, even though I have room, I don't like, and I'll get to it in a second, I don't like cranking the bass knob on the pedal all the way. It adds low in some places and not in others, and so it's not quite what I want personally, but I love how the drive sounds. So a plus, and it's set to like, I don't know, 1:32 o'clock is about where the bass is on this. So I have the clone on. Here it is again, so you can kind of hear it. It gets, the low end disappears a little bit. Now, in a mix, is that a big deal? No, but I like to hear it. So let's turn it on. I've messed with this before. If I add like between 6 and 7 dB of low, it comes back. And I get this real full sound that I really like. I think that sounds awesome. I very much enjoy that because this is like it's got some character, this drive. So being able to put this in my Helix when I don't have an option that I think is similar enough is very cool. So you can do that. You can't do too much else, but it depends. If you're building out song-specific presets for your band or for your church or wherever you're playing, you may find that like you could pull more things out. I could then use the Heir Apparent, which is a pretty DSP heavy drive in and of itself. I could use that to boost it. I like how that sounds. I think that sounds pretty good boosting it. I was curious about that, like with a modeled drive pushing. I think you have to adjust things a little differently with that. And I think overall that's the same for anything. But it's really cool to be able to put a drive pedal, which is on the verge of kind of got like a fuzz kind of texture. I think it's really cool that we can do that.
Bradford and I are going to share some personal experiences. Having used Proxy now for a while, we've used it live, playing at our churches. We've made hundreds of captures of clones between the two of us at this point. Mini amps and pedals and things like that. So I will say right off the bat, I absolutely love Proxy. I know there's a debate between, models versus captures. What's better? We love captures here, or clones, because we get to play all of our amps that we love and don't often get to play live. Now we get to play them in Stadium. And that's sort of been my experience making these clones, using these clones. They sound exactly like the amps in pretty much any scenario we can run them through. And drives, yeah. And, using it in a Stadium preset live on Sunday was awesome. It's something that I've always wanted, and I know units like this exist, like the Quad Cortex, but I just love the Helix, the Line 6 ecosystem, and now being able to use these clones within that ecosystem, programming everything that I want to program for a song or a preset, stuff like that. It's been a joy, and it really feels like it has taken this unit, the Stadium, as like a top tier unit and even just elevated it even higher. So I love using Stadium. I can't wait to get more amps cloned and try out more stuff in the Stadium. And I think the future is bright for Line 6 in this regard. I know it's a crowded space too with captures. So that's been my experience. Nothing but, I have not run into any issues making clones or using them. It's been great.
So like Brian said, we not only have we made loads on Stadium, but it's what we do. We make captures, and
we've made loads on everything. Yeah.
On everything, yes. I have found that everybody does things a little differently, of course, but I personally like how Line 6 has laid out the whole capture process the most. And as it goes for testing things, when you get done with a capture, you can test it. So in the what I did was a drive capture. It pulls up, it automatically lets me choose, and in this case I wanted to use a capture so I could test it because that's how I would use it. I could pull up a capture of an amp to test the capture of the drive I just made.
Yeah.
So it's very fluid. It's very user friendly. And then the way you go through and choose captures, within a preset, that in and of itself, these are things that maybe most people don't think about or care about. We use lots of different units for what we do, and I think the most users use one unit, maybe a second, but certainly not as many as we are just for, in the business we're in. So everything about how it's implemented makes it very fluid, and it's very thoughtful.
So let's talk for a bit about how it sounds, and maybe talk about how it compares to other units on the market.
Let's get subjective,
generally. Brian. Let's be subjective. As Bradford mentioned, we have captured so many amps for not every amp capture platform, but like Quad Cortex V1, V2, Kemper V1, V2, Tonex V1, V2. And now Proxy and NAMM, Headrush Prime, done amp captures, done a bunch for Headrush Prime. I feel like Proxy sits at the top of the heap with all of those things. And I really would consider Tonex V2, Quad Cortex V2, and Proxy. We haven't used Kemper V2 much because it's barely out of beta. And we had some weird issues with it when we tried it.
But it was on beta, so yeah.
Yeah, it was on beta, So I feel like all of these platforms really do a fantastic job of capturing the amp itself. Like, it can be indistinguishable when you listen to a capture or a clone versus the amp. As Bradford said, like, Line 6 makes it easy to test things out. So, just the A/B, dialogue that you get is really great. But you can build a preset out, and that would allow you to test like drives and compression, even reverbs and delays into these clones, like amp clones, and compare the clone to the real thing. And I've done that a lot. I'll say the clone reacts exactly like the amp when it comes to the way it responds to effects, the way it responds to rolling your volume off. The impressive thing is this is like early day. This is day one, essentially. I guess there's a 1.3.1 update out now where they improve things slightly, more for like high gain and that kind of thing. But it's doing a really great job. And I think it easily competes with and matches the best of the best in the other, offerings in the market that do these clones or captures.
Yeah. That's exactly what I would say. That last statement, like we're intentional about, we don't make, this statements that say like, this is the best thing ever. We try to say, this is the best for these people or this kind of player or this type of sound or whatever. We'll say something like that maybe, but we feel like that's kind of like, it'd be real easy for people to kind of take what we say and maybe get bothered when they try it and it doesn't work for them. And so we try to turn the question around on people and say, in what regard, like what's important to you? What's, we say that more because we're trying to be helpful and not just like throw around like the flavor of the week. And I think what you just said at the end of your statement there was like, this is no slouch. Like this is up there with the other ones in the market. Like I have preferences about Kemper, Tonex, Quad Cortex, like themselves. And this is right up there and hangs just as well. I will say I have this rule that I have for myself, and when I share this with people if they're expressing some troubles or having with a new unit or pedal, whatever it is, you can't do things the same way you always did them. I took my patch that I have dialed in very much exactly like how I like it, dropped captures in, and I was like, I'm not loving how that sounds. And it's like, you gotta start over. You gotta tweak things because everything's gonna react differently. A capture, I made the capture that I was using, and Line 6 did not. So I was dialing all this stuff in a way to match the way Line 6 created the models of the C30 or a Plexi or whatever it was I was using. And so I had to start over, had to start tweaking things a little bit differently, not as much volume, not as much gain. I had to up the level of the mix of the verbs and the delays to kind of match where it was and that kind of thing. But, you're using something different. You got to treat it as something different. And you got to use your ears. Don't worry about like where levels look and you're like, oh, that seems like way too much volume. That seems like not enough gain or whatever. Don't use your eyes to determine how something works. Use your ears and make sure it sounds, feels, reacts. And I had to do that for myself. And I have found like the longer I've spent doing that, I'm like, oh yeah, like this is doing exactly what I want it to do. But you can't just like swap out, some people may think, well, why would you use a capture of a C30 when there's an Agora model of a C30? That's very fair. My argument is
Good
more
question.
that like we made the capture so it kind of sits, it's like a little more familiar to have if you're gonna run 2 amps running 2 captures of made by the same people, made with the same kind of setup, it matches a little bit better. Does it really matter? I don't know. But I mean we're talking about at this point it's a game of inches, like, and that's not a diss on any of these companies, certainly not a diss on Line 6. It's more of like everybody's done so well that any jump that we're going to find, it's not quite as big of a deal anymore. And that's a good thing. It's a fun thing. It's very cool to know that we have a unit like this. And this is probably my preferred unit for all-in-one to begin with, but especially now that we have Capture Tech.
I was watching a Tone Junkie video. Shout out to our buddy HW over at Tone Junkie.
Well, hello there.
He made this statement. Hello there. Yes, he made this statement with all of these units on the market. Kemper, Tonex, Quad Cortex, now Stadium. The tone or the way that these captures or tone models or clones sound is not the differentiating factor anymore, because they all sound like the amp that they've captured. The differentiating factor is now the ecosystem, everything that exists around it with these units.
Yeah.
And that's a strength, I think, for Line 6, especially if you're looking for an all-in-one unit, because the ecosystem around it, the Helix, you know, the whole thing all together, the sum of its parts is a really compelling offering in the market.
Yeah.
There's not much else that'll do everything it can do. There's nothing else that can do everything it can do, especially with Showcase. But, you know, if Showcase isn't something that is a buying decision for you, there's not much else that does all of it as well as the Stadium does. You know, if you're a pedal board guy, maybe Tonex is the right move for you. Maybe you wait for the Stadium Stomp thing that may or may not be coming out one day, you know, something like that. But I think the compelling argument for Line 6 is that you've got this world-class ecosystem unit, effects library, usability, interface, all of this that now has amp clones in it that sound just like the amps. It's pretty awesome.
So if you're looking for proxy captures of anything, there are a handful of people who create stuff, ourselves included, our friend Jonathan at Tone Junkie. You got guys like Jason Sedites, maybe even Steve Sterlacci. I'm not sure if he's making anything yet. Tone Shepherd, you got Tone Factor. There's plenty of people making stuff. And we tend to make things and we charge for them. We have a very detailed studio setup to make things sound as good as possible. But there is also something to be said for just a user experience where you just go and you download things. You know, there's a marketplace for Helix presets as is. Eric Klein has mentioned that there is something in the works. And I guess if it doesn't get up on the ground as soon as they would like, or if it never gets on the ground, whatever, they're going to make it, you know, was it custom tone, right?
Custom tone, yeah.
That you can see, you will see in some Facebook groups that you can go, there's a file section, just about every Facebook group, and people are uploading them there as well. But if you'd like to try some stuff for free, not to suggest that like, hey, we're the best at this, but more to say that like, hey, we've done this a lot and we've pushed the button enough times. We have this figured out to a good extent. Yeah, we got this figured out enough to a certain extent that we feel pretty good about what we offer, and we have a whole free download section. You don't even have to buy anything from us. We just want, if you want to experience Proxy, you want to know what it's like and how it's fun. I mean, one of them is an AC30. There is in fact an AC30 in the unit. Could understand why some people are like, why would I use that?
Why? Yeah.
But still, you could try out some captures. There's also a Rev
different
T25.
AC30. Yeah.
There's a Victory Sheriff up on our website, which is like a JTM45 in a way. So, you know, if you want to check some of that stuff out, that's all over in the free download section at signaltheoryaudio.com. And if you have not, please consider subscribing. And thanks so much. We like making videos like this. So if you have a question and we think that enough people are going to want to know about it, we may just make a video about it. Thank you so much. We'll see you next time.
All right. Bye.